Bum, bum, bum. And boy, it says we're live. I like that. Oh, yeah. There we go. Will it be a good day today? I think it's going to be a good day today. I need to, I wonder if I can adjust the legs on this. Let's see if I can. I'm just going to adjust my mic stand here real fast. I hope we're all doing well today. Oh, that's much better. That's much better. Yeah. Boy, a little more leg room like that. Very good, very good. So yeah, today is what is today? Today's Thursday. End of the book reading stream week. At any rate. Yeah. So then the week itself is slowly coming to an end. Tomorrow's the weekend. Tomorrow's the first day of the weekend. Friday is always the first day of the weekend. Why not? But anyway, here we go. We're working our way through A Tale of Two Cities. We probably have 2 more days to go. That's going to be today, obviously, and then because this is our Monday through Thursday show, and today being a Thursday, we'll finish this this upcoming Monday. It is the right chat there, Anya. Good morning. Good to see you. Alrighty. Now, today we're going to get most of the way through it, and we're probably not going to have time to read the final few chapters today, but we'll finish that on Monday. Now, once we're done with this book, I'm starting to get a little overwhelmed with actual work right now, which is good. But that's also going to mean I'm going to have to take a book club's going to have to take a bit of a back seat there. So I'm going to be taking a bit of a break till everything is done, because that's when stuff happens. It happens fast. So after this coming Monday, we're gonna just put this on hiatus for a couple of weeks. Yeah, but tell you what, boy, work has been dreadful. It's been absolutely dreadful. That's okay though. I'm not going to not going to talk too much about it. But yeah. I mean, even just like general voice stuff. Not good. Yep, all of my acting friends who were too good to do voice work, all of a sudden during the Rona, they're like, this voice stuff's actually pretty good. Oh boy. Okay, bunch of weasels they are. All right. But let's do we need a little recap? Let's actually back up a page because we had a big reveal yesterday. Big reveal. The third accuser is So you had the accused. So Charles Darnay is back in trial. He's been arrested like literally 2 hours after he was freed. But he's been rearrested and he's been accused of being aristocracy again by 3 people: Monsieur Defarge, Madame Defarge, and Dr. Manette, our good man Dr. Manette, who. And the Defarge, when he was storming the Bastille, he went to Dr. Manette's old cell where Dr. Manette had been holed up for 18 years, found some letter inside it or a paper, and that is apparently I don't know. We're going to find out that apparently counts as Dr. Manette, and we're about to read it. Man, these people are terrible. All right. Let's where are we at? We need. I think we're good. I think we're good to go. Man, the air is just terrible around here. There's like a big fire somewhere. Big forest fire. I can smell it. All right. Not good. Good morning, Melissa. Good morning. We're about to start. Um, hmm. Yes. Yes. Yeah. I'll still be doing that. Yeah, it's the week, the work week stuff there, which is yeah. I'm just gonna have a bunch of stuff just like coming on down. Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, I got an email from a work email from an actual work email yeah, from my agent yesterday. It was just like, okay, all right. So they're about okay. So Charles Dickens on trial. This letter has been introduced, which apparently is going to make Dr. Manette the third person accusing Charles Dickens of being a swine. An emigrant swine who deserves to have his beard shaved by Madame la Guillotine. Alrighty. I guess the question here is, okay. I'm not. See, this looks like it's going to be a long. Oh, and it has. Boy, okay. I'm not going to do the first one. Boy, how to do the voice in this? It's super long. Okay, we'll figure it out. Chapter 10: The Substance of the Shadow. No, who's it being read by? Oh, it's being read by Defarge. Yeah, this is complicated. Okay, so this is Dr. Manette's words being read by Monsieur Defarge. So I'm just going to go straight narrator on that. This is the letter. I, Alexandre Manette, unfortunate physician, native of Beauvais and afterwards resident in Paris, write this melancholy paper in my doleful cell in the Bastille during the last month of the year 1767. I write it at stolen intervals, under every difficulty. I design to secrete it in the wall of the chimney, where I have slowly and laboriously made a place of concealment for it. Some pitying hand may find it there when I and my sorrows are dust. These words are formed by the rusty iron point with which I write with difficulty in scrapings of soot and charcoal from the chimney, mixed with blood, in the last month of the 10th year of my captivity. Hope has quite departed from my breast. I know from terrible warnings I have noted in myself that my reason will not last long, that my reason will not long remain unimpaired. But I solemnly declare that I am at this time in the possession of my right mind, that my memory is exact and circumstantial, and that I write the truth as I shall answer for these my last recorded words, whether they be ever read by men or not, at the eternal judgment seat. One cloudy moonlight night, in the 3rd week of December, I think the 22nd of the month, in the year 1757, I was walking on a retired part of the quay by the Seine, for the refreshment of the frosty air, at an hour's distance from my place of residence, in the street of the School of Medicine, when a carriage came along behind me, driven very fast. As I stood aside to let that carriage pass, apprehensive that it might otherwise run me down, a head was put out the window, and a voice called to the driver to stop. The carriage stopped as soon as the driver could rein in his horses, and the same voice called to me by my name. I answered. The carriage was then so far in advance of me that two gentlemen had time to open the door and alight before I came up with it. I observed that they were both wrapped in cloaks and appeared to conceal themselves. As they stood side by side near the carriage door, I also observed that they both looked of about my own age, or rather younger, and that they were greatly alike in stature, manner, voice, and as far as I could see, face too. "You are Dr. Manette," said one. "I am." "Dr. Manette, formerly of Beauvais," said the other, "the young physician, originally an expert surgeon, who within the last year or two has made a rising reputation in Paris." "Gentlemen," I returned, "I am that Dr. Manette of whom you speak so graciously." "We have been to your residence," said the first, "and not being so fortunate as to find you there, and being informed that you were probably walking in this direction, we followed in the hope of overtaking you. Will you please enter the carriage?" The manner of both was imperious, and they both moved, as these words were spoken, so as to place me between themselves and the carriage door. They were armed. I was not. "Gentlemen," said I, "pardon me, but I usually inquire who does me the honor to seek my assistance, and what is the nature of the case to which I am summoned?" The reply to this was made by him who had spoken second. "Doctor, your clients are people of condition. As to the nature of the case, our confidence in your skill assures us that you will ascertain it for yourself better than we can describe it. Enough. Will you please enter the carriage?" I could do nothing but comply, and I entered it in silence. They both entered after me, the last springing in after putting up the steps. The carriage turned about and drove on at its former speed. I repeat this conversation exactly as it occurred. I have no doubt that it is word for word the same. I describe everything exactly as it took place, constraining my mind not to wander from the task. Where I make the broken marks that follow here, I leave off for the time, and put my paper in its hiding place. The carriage left the streets behind, passed the north barrier, and emerged upon the country road. At 2/3 of a league from the barrier, I did not estimate the distance at that time, but afterwards, when I traversed it, it struck out of the main avenue, and presently stopped at a solitary house. We all three alighted, and walked by a damp, soft footpath in a garden where a neglected fountain had overflowed, to the door of the house. It was not opened immediately, in answer to the ringing of the bell, and one of my two conductors struck the man who opened it with his heavy riding glove across the face. There was nothing in this action to attract my particular attention, for I had seen common people struck more commonly than dogs. But the other of the two, being angry likewise, struck the man in like manner with his arm. The look and bearing of the brothers were then so exactly alike that I then first perceived them to be twin brothers. From the time of our alighting at the outer gate, which we found locked, and which one of the brothers had opened to admit us, and had relocked, I had heard cries proceeding from an upper chamber. I was conducted to this chamber straight, the cries growing louder as we ascended the stairs, and I found a patient in a high fever of the brain lying on a bed. The patient was a woman of great beauty, and young, assuredly not much past 20. Her hair was torn and ragged, and her arms were bound to her sides with sashes and handkerchiefs. I noticed that these bonds were all portions of a gentleman's dress. On one of them, which was a fringed scarf for a dress of ceremony, I saw the armorial bearings of a noble, and the letter E. I saw this within the first minute of my contemplation of the patient, for in her restless striving she had turned over on her face on the edge of the bed, had drawn the end of the scarf into her mouth, and was in danger of suffocation. My first act was to put out my hand to relieve her breathing, and in moving the scarf aside, the embroidery in the corner caught my sight. I turned her gently over, placed my hands upon her breast to calm her, and keep her down, and looked into her face. Her eyes were dilated and wild, and she constantly uttered piercing shrieks and repeated the words, "My husband, my father, and my brother," and then counted up to 12, and said, "Hush." For an instant, and no more, she would pause to listen, and then the piercing shrieks would begin again, and she would repeat the cry, "My husband, my father, and my brother," and would count up to 12, and say, "Hush." There was no variation in the order or the manner. There was no cessation, but the regular moment's pause in the utterance of these sounds. Good morning, Rose. Good morning. Yeah, we just started a few minutes ago. We're reading. This is the letter. This is the letter which Dr. Manette wrote many years ago when he was still imprisoned, in his 10th year, when he was imprisoned before the book began. It was found and is introduced as evidence at the trial of Charles Darnay. And thank you for sharing. How long, I asked, has this lasted? To distinguish the brothers, I will call them the elder and the younger. By the elder, I mean him who exercised the most authority. It was the elder who replied, "Since about this hour last night." She has a husband, a father, and a brother. A brother. I do not address her brother. He answered with great contempt, "No." She has some recent association with the number 12. The younger brother impatiently rejoined, "With 12 o'clock?" "See, gentlemen," said I, Dr. Manette, still keeping my hands upon her breast, "how useless I am, as you have brought me. If I had known what I was coming to see, I could have come provided. As it is, time must be lost. There are no medicines to be obtained in this lonely place." The elder brother looked to the younger, who said haughtily, "There's a case of medicines here," and brought it from a closet and put it on the table. I opened some of the bottles, smelt them, and put the stoppers to my lips. If I had wanted to use anything save narcotic medicines that were poisons in themselves, I would not have administered any of those. "Do you doubt them?" asked the younger brother. "You see, monsieur, I am going to use them," I replied, and said no more. I made the patient swallow, with great difficulty, and after many efforts, the dose that I desired to give. As I intended to repeat it after a while, and as it was necessary to watch its influence, I then sat down by the side of the bed. There was a timid and suppressed woman in attendance, a wife of the man downstairs, who had retreated into a corner. The house was damp and decayed, indifferently furnished, evidently, recently occupied and temporarily used. Some thick old hangings had been nailed up before the windows to deaden the sound of the shrieks. They continued to be uttered in their regular succession, with the cry, "My husband, my father, and my brother," the counting up to 12, and "Hush." The frenzy was so violent that I had not unfastened the bandages restraining the arms, but I had looked to them to see that they were not painful. The only spark of encouragement in the case was that my hand upon the sufferer's breast had this soothing influence, that for minutes at a time it tranquilized the figure. It had no effect upon the cries. No pendulum could be more regular. For the reason that my hand had this effect, I assume, I had sat by the side of the bed for half an hour, with the two brothers looking on, before the elder said, "There is another patient." I was startled and asked, "Is it a pressing case?" "You had better see," he carelessly answered, and took up a light. The other patient lay in a back room, across a second staircase, which was a species of loft over a stable. There was a low plastered ceiling to a part of it. The rest was open to the ridge of the tiled roof, and there were beams across. Hay and straw were stored in that portion of the place, faggots for firing, and a heap of apples and sand. I had to pass through that path to get at the other. My memory is circumstantial and unshaken. I try it with these details, and I see them all in this my cell in the Bastille, near the close of the 10th year of my captivity, as I saw them all that night. "Is up there lightning? Good morning, sir. Good morning. Good to see you." On some hay on the ground, with a cushion thrown under his head, lay a handsome peasant boy, a boy of not more than 17 at the most. He lay on his back, with his teeth set, his right hand clenched on his breast, and his glaring eyes looking straight upward. I could not see where his wound was, as I kneeled on one knee over him, but I could see that he was dying of a wound from a sharp point. "I'm a doctor, my poor fellow," said I. "Let me examine it." "I do not want it examined," he answered. "Let it be." It was under his hand, and I soothed him to let me move his hand away. The wound was a sword thrust, received from 20 to 24 hours before, but no skill could have saved him if it had been looked to without delay. He was then dying fast. As I turned my eyes to the elder brother, I saw him looking down at this handsome boy whose life was ebbing out, as if he were a wounded bird, or hare, or rabbit, not at all as if he were a fellow creature. "How has this been done, monsieur?" said I. "A crazed young common dog, a serf, forced my brother to draw upon him, and has fallen by my brother's sword, like a gentleman." There was no touch of pity, sorrow, or kindred humanity in this answer. The speaker seemed to acknowledge that it was inconvenient to have that different order of creature dying there, and that it would have been better if he had died in the usual obscure routine of his vermin kind. He was quite incapable of any compassionate feeling about the boy, or about his fate. The boy's eyes had slowly moved to him as he had spoken, and they now slowly moved to me. "Doctor, they are very proud, these nobles. But we common dogs are proud too, sometimes. They plunder us, outrage us, beat us, kill us. But we have a little pride left, sometimes. She. Have you seen her, doctor?" The shrieks and the cries were audible there, though subdued by the distance. He referred to them as if she were lying in our presence. I said, "I have seen her." "She is my sister, doctor. They have had their shameful rights, these nobles, in the modesty and virtue of our sisters, many years. But we have had good girls among us. I know it, and have heard my father say so. She was a good girl. She was betrothed to a good young man, too, a tenant of his. We were all tenants of his. That man who stands there, the other is his brother, the worst of a bad race." It was with the greatest difficulty that the boy gathered bodily force to speak, but his spirit spoke with a dreadful emphasis. "We were so robbed by that man who stands there, as all we common dogs are by these superior beings, taxed by him without mercy, obliged to work for him without pay, obliged to grind our corn at his mill, obliged to feed scores of his tame birds on our wretched crops, and forbidden for our lives to keep a single tame bird of our own. pillaged and plundered to that degree that when we chanced to have a bit of meat, we ate it in fear, with the door barred and the shutters closed, that his people should not see it and take it from us. I say, we were so robbed and hunted, and we were made so poor, that our father told us it was a dreadful thing to bring a child into the world, and that what we should most pray for was that our women might be barren and our miserable race die out. I had never before seen the sense of being oppressed bursting forth like a fire. I had supposed that it must be latent in the people somewhere, but I had never seen it break out until I saw it in the dying boy. Nevertheless, Doctor, my sister married. He was ailing at that time, poor fellow, and she married her lover, that she might tend and comfort him in our cottage, our dog hut, as that man would call it. She had not been married many weeks when that man's brother saw her and admired her, and asked that man to lend her to him. For what are husbands among us? He was willing enough, but my sister was good and virtuous, and hated his brother with a hatred as strong as mine. What did the two then, to persuade her husband to use his influence with her to make her willing? The boy's eyes, which had been fixed on mine, slowly turned to the looker-on, and I saw in the two faces that all he said was true. The two opposing kinds of pride confronting one another I can see even in this Bastille. The gentleman's all negligent indifference, the peasant's all trodden down sentiment and passionate revenge. You know, Doctor, that it is among the rights of these nobles to harness us common dogs to carts and drive us. They so harnessed him and drove him. You know that it is among their rights to keep us in their grounds all night, quieting the frogs, in order that their noble sleep may not be disturbed. They kept him out in the unwholesome mists at night, and ordered him back into his harness in the day. But he was not persuaded. No, taken out of harness one day at noon to feed, if he could find food. He sobbed 12 times, once for every stroke of the bell, and died on her bosom. Nothing human could have held life in the boy but his determination to tell all his wrong. He forced back the gathering shadows of death as he forced his clenched right hand to remain clenched and to cover his wound. Then, with that man's permission and even with his aid, his brother took her away. In spite of what I know, she must have told his brother, and what that is will not be long unknown to you, Doctor, if it is now. His brother took her away, for his pleasure and diversion, for a little while. I saw her pass me on the road. When I took the tidings home, our father's heart burst. He never spoke one of the words that filled it. I took my young sister, for I have another, to a place beyond the reach of this man, and where at least she will never be his vassal. Then I tracked the brother here, and late last night climbed in, a common dog, but sword in hand. Where is the loft window? It was somewhere here. The room was darkening to his sight. The world was narrowing around him. I glanced about me and saw that the hay and straw were trampled over the floor as if there had been a struggle. She heard me and ran in. I told her not to come near us till he was dead. He came in and first tossed me some pieces of money, then struck at me with a whip. But I, though a common dog, so struck at him as to make him draw. Let him break it into as many pieces as he will, the sword that he stained with my common blood. He drew to defend himself, thrust at me with all his skill for his life. My glance had fallen, but a few moments before, on the fragments of a broken sword lying among the hay. That weapon was a gentleman's. In another place lay an old sword that seemed to have been a soldier's. "Now, lift me up, doctor, lift me up. Where is he?" "He's not here," I said, supporting the boy, and thinking that he referred to the brother. "He, proud as these nobles are, he is afraid to see me. Where is the man who was here? Turn my face to him." I did so, raising the boy's head against my knee, but invested for the moment with extraordinary power, he raised himself completely, obliging me to rise too, or I could not have still supported him. "Marquis," said the boy, turned to him with his eyes opened wide and his right hand raised, "in the days when all these things are to be answered for, I summon you and yours to the last of your bad race to answer for them. I mark this cross of blood upon you as a sign that I do it. In the days when all these things are to be answered for, I summon your brother, the worst of the bad race, to answer for them separately. I mark this cross of blood upon him as a sign that I do it." Twice he put his hand to the wound in his breast, and with his forefinger drew a cross in the air. He stood for an instant, with the finger yet raised, and as it dropped, he dropped with it, and I laid him down dead. When I returned to the bedside of the young woman, I found her raving in precisely the same order of continuity. I knew that this might last for many hours, and that it would probably end in the silence of the grave. I repeated the medicines I had given her, and I sat at the side of the bed until the night was far advanced. She never abated the piercing quality of her shrieks, never stumbled in the distinctness or the order of her words. They were always, "My husband, my father, and my brother. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Hush." This lasted 26 hours from the time when I first saw her. I had come and gone twice, and was again sitting by her when she began to falter. I did what little could be done to assist that opportunity, and by she sank into a lethargy and lay like the dead. It was as if the wind and rain had lulled at last, after a long and fearful storm. I released her arms, and called the woman to assist me to compose her figure and the dress she had torn. It was then that I knew her condition to be that of one in whom the first expectations of being a mother have arisen, and it was then that I lost the little hope I had had of her. "Is she dead?" asked the Marquis, whom I will still describe as the elder brother, coming booted into the room from his horse. "Not dead," said I, "but like to die." "What strength there is in these common bodies," he said, looking down at her with some curiosity. "There is prodigious strength," I answered him, "in sorrow and despair." He first laughed at my words, and then frowned at them. He moved a chair with his foot near to mine, ordered the woman away, and said in a subdued voice, "Doctor, finding my brother in this difficulty, with these hinds, I recommended that your aid should be invited. Your reputation is high, and as a young man with your fortune to make, you are probably mindful of your interest. The things that you see here are things to be seen and not spoken of." I listened to the patient's breathing and avoided answering. "Do you honor me with your attention, doctor?" Monsieur, said I, in my profession the communications of patients are always received in confidence. I was guarded in my answer, for I was troubled in my mind with what I had heard and seen. Her breathing was difficult to trace, that I carefully tried the pulse and the heart. There was life, and no more. Looking round as I resumed my seat, I found both the brothers intent upon me. I write with so much difficulty. The cold is so severe, I am so fearful of being detected, and consigned to an underground cell and total darkness, that I must abridge this narrative. There is no confusion or failure in my memory. It can recall and could detail every word that was ever spoken between me and those brothers. She lingered for a week. Towards the last, I could understand some few syllables that she said to me by placing my ear close to her lips. She asked me where she was, and I told her. Who I was, and I told her. It was in vain that I asked her for her family name. She faintly shook her head upon the pillow and kept her secret, as the boy had done. I had no opportunity of asking her any question until I had told the brothers that she was sinking fast and could not live another day. Until then, though no one ever presented to her consciousness, until then, though no one was ever presented to her consciousness, save the woman and myself, one or other of them had always jealously sat behind the curtain at the head of the bed when I was there. But when it came to that, they seemed careless what communication I might hold with her, as if, the thought passed my mind, I were dying too. I always observed that their pride bitterly resented the younger brothers, as I call him, having crossed swords with a peasant, and that peasant a boy. The only consideration that appeared to affect the mind of either of them was the consideration that this was highly degrading to the family and was ridiculous. As often as I caught the younger brother's eyes, their expression reminded me that he disliked me deeply for knowing what I knew from the boy. He was smoother and more polite to me than the elder, but I saw this. I also saw that I was an encumbrance in the mind of the elder, too. My patient died 2 hours before midnight, at a time by my watch, answering almost to the minute when I had first seen her. I was alone with her when her forlorn young head drooped gently on one side, and all her earthly wrongs and sorrows ended. The brothers were waiting in a room downstairs, impatient to ride away. I had heard them, alone at the bedside, striking their boots with their riding whips and loitering up and down. "At last she is dead?" asked the elder when I went in. "She is dead," said I. "I congratulate you, my brother," were his words as he turned round. He had before offered me money, which I had postponed taking. He now gave me a rouleau of gold. How much is a rouleau? A rouleau is a cylindrical packet of coins, a coil or roll of ribbon, knitted wool, or other material. Okay, all right. A rouleau. A cylindrical packet of coins. All right. He now gave me a rouleau of gold. I took it from his hand, but laid it on the table. I had considered the question, and had resolved to accept nothing. "Pray excuse me," said I. "Under the circumstances, no." They exchanged looks, but bent their heads to me as I bent mine to them, and we parted without another word on either side. I am weary, 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 worn down by misery. I cannot read what I have written with this gaunt hand. Early in the morning, the rouleau of gold was left at my door in a little box with my name on the outside. From the first I had anxiously considered what I ought to do. I decided that day to write privately to the minister, stating the nature of the 2 cases to which I had been summoned and the place to which I had gone, in effect stating all the circumstances. I knew what court influence was, and what the immunities of the nobles were, and I expected that the matter would never be heard of. But I wished to relieve my own mind. I had kept the matter a profound secret, even from my wife, and this, too, I resolved to state in my letter. I had no apprehension whatever of my real danger, but I was conscious that there might be danger for others if others were compromised by possessing the knowledge that I possessed. I was much engaged that day, and could not complete my letter that night. I rose long before my usual time next morning to finish it. It was the last day of the year. The letter was lying before me, just completed, when I was told that a lady waited who wished to see me. I'm growing more and more unequal to the task I've set myself. It's so cold, so dark, my senses are so benumbed, and the gloom upon me is so dreadful. The lady was young, engaging, and handsome, but not marked for long life. She was in great agitation. She presented herself to me as the wife of the Marquis Saint-Hermond. I connected the title by which the boy had addressed the elder brother with the initial letter embroidered on the scarf, and had no difficulty in arriving at the conclusion that I had seen that nobleman very lately. My memory is still accurate, but I cannot write the words of our conversation. I suspect that I am watched more closely than I was, and I know not at what times I may be watched. She had in part suspected, and in part discovered, the main facts of the cruel story, of her husband's share in it, and my being resorted to. She did not know that the girl was dead. Her hope had been, she said in great distress, to show her, in secret, a woman's sympathy. Her hope had been to avert the wrath of heaven from a house that had long been hateful to the suffering many. She had reasons for believing that there was a young sister living, and her greatest desire was to help that sister. I could tell her nothing but that there was such a sister. Beyond that, I knew nothing. Her inducement to come to me, relying on my confidence, had been the hope that I could tell her the name and place of abode, whereas to this wretched hour I am ignorant of both. These scraps of paper fail me. One was taken from me with a warning yesterday. I must finish my record today. She was a good, compassionate lady, and not happy in her marriage. How could she be? The brother distrusted and disliked her, and his influence was all opposed to her. She stood in dread of him, and in dread of her husband, too. When I handed her down to the door, there was a child, a pretty boy from 2 to 3 years old, in her carriage. "For his sake, doctor," she said, pointing to him in tears, "I would do all I can to make what poor amends I can. He will never prosper in his inheritance otherwise. I have a presentiment that if no other innocent atonement is made for this, it will one day be required of him. What I have left to call my own, it is little beyond the worth of a few jewels. I will make it the first charge of his life to bestow, with the compassion and lamenting of his dead mother, on this injured family, if the sister can be discovered." She kissed the boy, and said, caressing him, "It is for thine own dear sake. Thou wilt be faithful, little Charles?" The child answered her bravely, "Yes." I kissed her hand, and she took him in her arms and went away caressing him. I never saw her more. As she had mentioned her husband's name in the faith that I knew it, I added no mention of it to my letter. I sealed my letter, and, not trusting it out of my own hands, delivered it myself that day. That night, the last night of the year, towards 9 o'clock, a man in a black dress rang at my gate, demanded to see me, and softly followed my servant, Ernest Defarge, a youth, upstairs. When my servant came into the room where I sat with my wife, oh, my wife, beloved of my heart, my fair young English wife, we saw the man, who was supposed to be at the gate, standing silent behind him. "An urgent case in the Rue Saint-Honore," he said. It would not detain me. He had a coach in waiting. It brought me here. It brought me to my grave. When I was clear of the house, a black muffler was drawn tightly over my mouth from behind, and my arms were pinioned. The two brothers crossed the road from a dark corner and identified me with a single gesture. The Marquis took from his pocket the letter I had written, showed it to me, burnt it in the light of a lantern that was held, and extinguished the ashes with his foot. Not a word was spoken. I was brought here. I was brought to my living grave. If it had pleased God to put it in the hard heart of either of the brothers in all these frightful years to grant me any tidings of my dearest wife, so much as to let me know by a word whether alive or dead, I might have thought that he had not quite abandoned them. But now I believe that the mark of the Red Cross is fatal to them, and they have no part in his mercies. And them and their descendants, to the last of their race, I, Alexandre Manette, unhappy prisoner, do this night of this last night of the year 1767, in my unbearable agony, denounce to the times when all these things shall be answered for. I denounce them to heaven and to earth. Just going to back up a second here. Softly followed his servant Ernest. His servant is Ernest Defarge. Okay, boy. Okay, boy. So many familiar faces in there. So how is Ernest Ernest Defarge? Okay, so Dr. Manette's own servant. Okay, all right. Okay, so that okay, so all right. Just getting this right. So that is how the wine merchant Defarge ended up in custody of Dr. Manette 18 years later, because he knew him and was like, okay, I'll put him up in this hotel till we can get him out of France. Defarge, Ernest Defarge. Okay. And that was the end of the letter. Back to the courthouse. A terrible sound arose when the reading of this document was done. A sound of craving and eagerness that had nothing articulate in it but blood. The narrative called up the most revengeful passions of the time, and there was not a head in the nation but must have dropped before it. Little need, in presence of that tribunal and that auditory, to show how the Defarges had not made the paper public, with the other captured Bastille memorials borne in procession, and had kept it biding their time. Little need to show that this detested family name had long been anathematized by Saint Antoine, and was wrought into the fatal register. The man never trod ground whose virtues and services would have sustained him in that place and day against such denunciation. And all the worse for the doomed man that the denouncer was a well-known citizen, his own attached friend, the father of his wife. One of the frenzied aspirations of the populace was for imitations of the questionable public virtues of antiquity, and for sacrifices and self-immolations on the people's altar. Therefore, when the president said, else had his own head quivered on his shoulders, that the good physician of the Republic would deserve better still of the Republic by rooting out an obnoxious family of aristocrats, and would doubtless feel a sacred glow and joy in making his daughter a widow and her child an orphan. There was wild excitement, patriotic fervor, not a touch of human sympathy. "Much influence around him has that doctor," murmured Madame Defarge, smiling to the Vengeance. "Save him now, my doctor, save him." At every juryman's vote there was a roar, another and another, roar and roar. Unanimously voted, at heart and by descent an aristocrat, an enemy of the Republic, a notorious oppressor of the people. Back to the conciergerie, and death within 24 hours. So it has not been Mr. Charles Darnay's day, that's for sure. Man. Heads, shoulders, knees, and toes. Well, did you get some exercise in there as well while tuning in? I think Charles Darnay is about to lose that head. It's just going to be shoulders, knees, and toes after that. After tomorrow. Boy, oh boy, oh boy. Man. Oh, there we go. Man, the air is so bad right now. It's all smoky and stuff. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Yeah. All right. Yeah, one second. Just fixing something here real fast. Okay. Bloop. Okay. Man. There's been some big foreshadowing going on, though. Man, that was a real sad chapter yesterday, where that one which is mainly about Sidney Carton. That was really sad, really sad. Heavy foreshadowing, very heavy foreshadowing. In we go. Charles Darnay. Second time on wow, this is the third trial in his life. He was at the beginning. We met him. He was on trial in England for being a French spy, and this is his second trial in France for being an aristocrat. And this time they're like off with his head. Good Lord. 24 hours to live. Chapter 11. Dusk. The wretched wife of the innocent man, thus doomed to die, fell under the sentence, as if she had been mortally stricken. But she uttered no sound, and so strong was the voice within her, representing that it was she of all the world who must uphold him in his misery, and not augment it, that it quickly raised her, even from that shock. The judges having to take part in a public demonstration out of doors, the tribunal adjourned. The quick noise and movement of the court's emptying itself by many passages had not ceased, when Lucie stood stretching out her arms towards her husband, with nothing in her face but love and consolation. "If I might touch him, if I might embrace him once, oh, good citizens, if you would have so much compassion for us." There was but a jailer left, along with 2 of the 4 men who had taken him last night, and Barsard. The people had all poured out to show in the streets. Barsard proposed to the rest, "Let her embrace him, then, it is but a moment." It was silently acquiesced in, and they passed her over the seats in the hall to a raised place where he, by leaning over the dock, could fold her in his arms. Farewell, dear darling of my soul, my parting blessing on my love. We shall meet again, where the weary are at rest. They were her husband's words as he held her to his bosom. Where's the fire? I don't know where the fire is, Anya. I don't know. It's definitely a forest fire of some kind. They were her husband's words as he held her to his bosom. I can bear it, dear Charles. I am supported from above. Don't suffer for me. A parting blessing for our child. I send it to her by you. I kiss her by you. I say farewell to her by you. My husband, no, a moment. He was tearing himself apart from her. We shall not be separated long. I feel that this will break my heart by and by. But I will do my duty while I can, and when I leave her, God will raise up her friends for her, as he did for me. Her father had followed her, and would have fallen on his knees to both of them, but that Darnay put out a hand and seized him, crying, No, no. What have you done? What have you done that you should kneel to us? We know now what a struggle you made of old. We know now what you underwent when you suspected my descent and when you knew it. We know now the natural antipathy you strove against and conquered for her dear sake. We thank you with all our hearts and all our love and duty. Heaven be with you. Her father's only answer was to draw his hands through his white hair and wring them with a shriek of anguish. It could not be otherwise, said the prisoner. All things have worked together as they have fallen out. It was the always vain endeavor to discharge my poor mother's trust that first brought my fatal presence near you. Good could never come of such evil. A happier end was not in nature to so unhappy a beginning. Be comforted and forgive me. Heaven bless you. As he was drawn away, his wife released him and stood looking after him, with her hands touching one another in the attitude of prayer, and with a radiant look upon her face, in which there was even a comforting smile. As he went out at the prisoner's door, she turned, laid her head lovingly on her father's breast, tried to speak to him, and fell at his feet. Then, issuing from the obscure corner from which he had never moved, Sidney Carton came and took her up. Only her father and Mr. Lorry were with her. His arm trembled as it raised her and supported her head. Yet there was an air about him that was not all of pity, that had a flush of pride in it. Shall I take her to a coach? I shall never feel a weight. He carried her lightly to the door and laid her tenderly down in a coach. Her father and their old friend got into it, and he took his seat beside the driver. When they arrived at the gateway where he had paused in the dark not many hours before, to picture to himself on which of the rough stones of the street her feet had trodden, he lifted her again, and carried her up the staircase to their rooms. There he laid her down on a couch, where her child and Miss Pross wept over her. "Don't recall her to herself," he said softly to the latter. "She's better so. Don't revive her to consciousness while she only faints." "Oh, Carton, Carton, dear Carton," cried little Lucie, springing up and throwing her arms passionately round him in a burst of grief. "Now that you have come, I think you will do something to help Mamma, something to save Papa. Oh, look at her, dear Carton. Can you, of all people who love her, bear to see her so?" He bent over the child and laid her blooming cheek against his face. He put her gently from him and looked at her unconscious mother. "Before I go," he said, and paused, "I may kiss her." It was remembered afterwards that when he bent down and touched her face with his lips, he murmured some words. The child who was nearest to him told them afterwards, and told her grandchildren, when she was a handsome old lady, that she heard him say, "A life you love." When he had gone out into the next room, he turned suddenly on Mr. Lorry and her father, who were following, and said to the latter, "You had great influence by yesterday, Dr. Manette. Let it at least be tried. These judges and all the men in power are very friendly to you, and very recognizant of your services, are they not?" "Nothing connected with Charles was concealed from me. I had the strongest assurances that I should save him, and I did." He returned the answer in great trouble and very slowly. Try them again. The hours between this and tomorrow afternoon are few and short, but try." "I intend to try. I will not rest a moment." "That's well. I've known such energy as yours do great things before now, though never," he added with a smile and a sigh together, "such great things as this. But try. Of little worth as life is when we misuse it, it is worth that effort. It will cost nothing to lay down if it were not." "I will go," said Dr. Manette, "to the prosecutor and the president straight, and I will go to others whom it is better not to name. I will write too, but stay, there's a celebration in the streets, and no one will be accessible until dark." "That's true. Well, it is a forlorn hope at the best, and not much the forlorner for being delayed till dark. I should like to know how you speed, though, mind, I expect nothing. When are you likely to have seen these dread powers, Dr. Manette?" "Immediately after dark, I should hope, within an hour or two from this." "It will be dark soon after 4. Let us stretch the hour or two. If I go to Mr. Lorry's at 9, shall I hear what you've done, either from our friend or from yourself?" "Yes." "May you prosper." Mr. Lorry followed Sidney to the outer door, and touched him on the shoulder as he was going away, causing him to turn. "I have no hope," said Mr. Lorry in a low and sorrowful whisper. "Nor have I." If any one of these men, or all of these men, were disposed to spare him, which is a large supposition, for what is his life or any man's to them, I doubt if they durst spare him after the demonstration in the court. And so do I. I heard the fall of the axe and that sound. Mr. Lorry leaned his arm upon the doorpost and bowed his face upon it. "Don't despond," said Carton very gently. "Don't grieve. I encouraged Dr. Manette in this idea, because I felt that it might one day be consolatory to her. Otherwise she might think his life was once only thrown away or wasted. and that might trouble her. Yes, 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 returned Mr. Lorry, drying his eyes. You are right, but he will perish. There is no real hope. Yes, he will perish. There's no real hope, echoed Carton, and walked with a settled step downstairs. Man, oh man. Well, yeah, how many chapters? There's 1, 2, 3, 4. Just going to take a quick look at the end. Where does this end at? Oh, it's going to be ending. Oh, okay. Boy, oh boy. So with that, okay, yeah, I think the best way to do this, yeah, we'll get through one more chapter here, darkness, and then we'll have time for like a short story or something maybe like that, and then that leaves 1, 2, 3 chapters for Monday, because yeah, I don't want to start Monday with just like a chapter to go, because then it's like, all right, there we go. Makes sense. Very good. Gonna have a sip of water here. Man. Blah, blah, blah. Okay. So good. All right. Oh, you know what? I forgot to post the link earlier. For the wiki page, for those who need it, here is the wiki page. Blah blah blah. A Tale of Two Cities. So far, so good, man. This is gonna be a tearjerker of an ending. I know it, man. So sad. Yeah. There we go. Chapter 12. Darkness. Sidney Carton paused in the street, not quite decided where to go. "At Tellson's banking house at 9, he said with a musing face. "Shall I do well in the meantime to show myself? I think so. It is best that these people should know there is such a man as I here. It is a sound precaution, and may be necessary preparation. But care. Let me think it out." Checking his steps, which had begun to tend towards an object, he took a turn or two in the already darkening street, and traced the thought in his mind to its possible consequences. His first impression was confirmed. "It's best," he said, finally resolved, "that these people should know that there is such a man as I here." And he turned his face towards Saint Antoine. Meanwhile, Defarge had described himself that day as the keeper of a wine shop in the Saint Antoine suburb. It was not difficult for one who knew the city well to find his house without asking any question. Having ascertained its situation, Carton came out of those closer streets again, and dined at a place of refreshment, and fell sound asleep after dinner. For the first time in many years, he had no strong drink. Since last night he had taken nothing but a little light, thin wine, and last night he had dropped the brandy slowly down on Mr. Lorry's hearth, like a man who had done with it. It was as late as 7 o'clock when he awoke refreshed, and went out into the streets again. As he passed along towards Saint Antoine, he stopped at a shop window, where there was a mirror, and slightly altered the disordered arrangement of his loose cravat, and his coat collar, and his wild hair. This done, he went on direct to Defarge's, and went in. There happened to be no customer in the shop but Jacques III, of the restless fingers and the croaking voice. This man, whom he had seen upon the jury, stood drinking at the little counter, in conversation with the Defarges, man and wife. The Vengeance assisted in the conversation, like a regular member of the establishment. As Carton walked in, took his seat, and asked, in very indifferent French, for a small measure of wine, Madame Defarge cast a careless glance at him, and then a keener, and then a keener, and then advanced himself to him and asked him what it was he had ordered. He repeated what he had already said. "English?" asked Madame Defarge inquisitively, raising her dark eyebrows. After looking at her, as if the sound of even a single French word were slow to express itself to him, he answered in his former strong foreign accent, "Yes, madame, yes, I am English." Madame Defarge returned to her counter to get the wine, and as he took up a Jacobin journal, what's a Jacobin journal? A member of a democratic club established in Paris in 1789, the Jacobins were the most radical and ruthless of the political groups formed in the wake of the French Revolution, and in association with Robespierre, they instituted the Terror of 1793 to 94. Okay. All right, so he's picking up some newspaper published by the Jacobins, right? Madame Defarge returned to her counter to get the wine, and as he took up a Jacobin journal and feigned to pore over it, puzzling out its meaning, he heard her say, "I swear to you, like Evremont." Defarge brought him the wine and gave him good evening. "How?" "Good evening." "Good evening, citizen," filling his glass. "Ah, good wine. I drink to the Republic." Defarge went back to the counter and said, "Certainly, a little alike." Madame sternly retorted, "I tell you he's a good deal like." Jacques III pacifically remarked, "He's so much in your mind, see you, madame." The amiable Vengeance added, with a laugh, "Yes, my faith, and you're looking forward with so much pleasure to seeing him once more tomorrow." Carton followed the lines and words of his paper with a slow forefinger, and with a studious and absorbed face. They were all leaning their arms on the counter close together, speaking low. After a silence of a few minutes, during which they all looked towards him without disturbing his outward attention from the Jacobin editor, they resumed their conversation. "It's true what Madame says," observed Jacques III. "Why stop? There's great force in that. Why stop?" Well, reasoned Defarge, but one must stop somewhere. After all, the question is still where. "At extermination," said Madame. "Magnificent," croaked Jacques III. The Vengeance also highly approved. "Extermination is good doctrine, my wife," said Defarge, rather troubled. "In general, I say nothing against it. But this doctor has suffered much. You have seen him today. You have observed his face when the paper was read." "I have observed his face," repeated Madame, contemptuously and angrily. "Yes, I have. I have observed his face. I have observed his face to be not the face of a true friend of the Republic. Let him take care of his face." "And you have observed, my wife," said Defarge in a deprecatory manner, "the anguish of his daughter, which must be a dreadful anguish to him." "I have observed his daughter," repeated Madame. "Yes, I have observed his daughter, more times than one. I have observed her today, and I have observed her other days. I have observed her in court, and I have observed her in the street by the prison. Let me but lift my finger." She seemed to raise it. The listener's eyes were always on his paper, and to let it fall with a rattle on the ledge before her, as if the axe had dropped. "The citizeness is superb," croaked the juryman. "She's an angel," said the Vengeance, and embraced her. "As to thee," pursued the madam, implacably addressing her husband, "if it depended on thee, which happily it does not, thou wouldst rescue this man even now." "No," protested Defarge, "not if to lift this glass. Not if to lift this—" he likes his wine, I guess. Not if to lift this glass would I do it. But I would leave the matter there. I say, stop there." "See you, then, Jacques," said Madame Defarge wrathfully, "and see you, too, my little Vengeance, see you both. Listen, for other crimes as tyrants and oppressors, I have this race a long time on my register, doomed to destruction and extermination. Ask my husband, is that so?"
"It is so."
"In the beginning of the great days, when the Bastille falls, he finds this paper of today, and he brings it home. And in the middle of the night, when this place is clear and shut, we read it, here on this spot, by the light of this lamp. Ask him, is that so?"
"It is so," assented Defarge.
"That night, I tell him, when the paper is read through, and the lamp is burnt out, and the day is gleaming in above those shutters, and between those iron bars, that I have now a secret to communicate. Ask him, is that so?"
"It is so," assented Defarge again.
"I communicate to him that secret. I smite this bosom with these two hands as I smite it now, and I tell him, Defarge, I was brought up among the fishermen of the seashore, and that peasant family so injured by the two Evremond brothers, as that Bastille paper describes, is my family. Defarge, that sister of the mortally wounded boy upon the ground, was my sister. That husband was my sister's husband. That unborn child was their child. That brother was my brother. That father was my father. Those dead are my dead. And that summons to answer for those things descends to me. Ask him, isn't it so?"
"It is so."
Once again, small world. Very small world. "Then tell wind and fire where to stop," returned Madame. "But don't tell me."
Both her hearers derived a horrible enjoyment from the deadly nature of her wrath.
The listener could feel how white she was without seeing her, and both highly commended it. Defarge, a weak minority, interposed a few words for the memory of the compassionate wife of the Marquis, but only elicited from his own wife a repetition of her last reply. "Tell the wind and fire where to stop, not me." Customers entered, and the group was broken up. The English customer paid for what he had, perplexedly counted his change, and asked, as a stranger, to be directed towards the National Palace. Madame Defarge took him to the door, and put her arm on his in pointing out the road. The English customer was not without his reflections, then, that it might be a good deed to seize that arm, lift it, and strike under it sharp and deep. But he went his way, and was soon swallowed up in the shadow of the prison wall. At the appointed hour he emerged from it to present himself in Mr. Lorry's room again, where he found the old gentleman walking to and fro in restless anxiety. He said he had been with Lucie until just now, and had only left her for a few minutes to come and keep his appointment. Her father had not been seen since he quitted the banking-house towards 4 o'clock. She had some faint hopes that his mediation might save Charles, but they were very slight. He had been more than 5 hours gone. Where could he be? Mr. Lorry waited until 10.
But Dr. Manette not returning, and he being unwilling to leave Lucie any longer, it was arranged that he should go back to her and come to the banking house again at midnight. In the meanwhile, Carton would wait alone by the fire for the doctor. He waited, and the clock struck 12, but Dr. Manette did not come back. Mr. Lorry returned and found no tidings of him, and brought none. Where could he be? They were discussing this question, and were almost building up some weak structure of hope on his prolonged absence, when they heard him on the stairs. The instant he entered the room, it was plain that all was lost. Whether he had really been to anyone, or whether he had been all that time traversing the streets, was never known. As he stood staring at them, they asked no question, for his face told them everything. "I cannot find it," said he, "and I must have it. Where is it?" His head and throat were bare, and as he spoke, with a helpless look straying all around, he took off his coat and let it drop on the floor. "Where is my bench? I have been looking everywhere for my bench, and I can't find it. What have they done with my work? Time presses. I must finish those shoes." They looked at one another, and their hearts died within them. "Come, come," said he, in a whimpering, miserable way. "Let me get to work. Give me my work." Receiving no answer, he tore his hair and beat his feet upon the ground like a distracted child. "Don't torture a poor forlorn wretch," he implored them with a dreadful cry, "but give me my work. What is to become of us if those shoes are not done tonight?" Lost, utterly lost. It was so clearly beyond hope to reason with him or try to restore him that, as if by agreement, they each put a hand upon his shoulder and soothed him to sit down before the fire, with a promise that he should have his work presently. He sank into the chair and brooded over the embers and shed tears, as if all that had happened since the garret time were a momentary fancy or a dream. Mr. Lorry saw him shrink into the exact figure that Defarge had in keeping. Affected and impressed with terror, as they both were, by this spectacle of ruin, it was not a time to yield to such emotions. His lonely daughter, bereft of her final hope and reliance, appealed to them both too strongly. Again, as if by agreement, they looked at one another with one meaning in their faces. Carton was the first to speak. "The last chance is gone. It was not much. Yes, he had better be taken to her. But before you go, will you for a moment steadily attend to me? Don't ask me why I make the stipulations I'm going to make, and exact the promise I'm going to exact. I have a reason, a good one." "I do not doubt it," answered Mr. Lorry. "Say on." The figure in the chair between them was all the time monotonously rocking itself to and fro and moaning. They spoke in such a tone as they would have used if they had been watching by a sick bed in the night. Carton stooped to pick up the coat, which lay almost entangling his feet. As he did so, a small case in which the doctor was accustomed to carry the lists of his day's duties fell lightly on the floor. Carton took it up, and there was a folded paper in it. "We should look at this," he said. Mr. Lorry nodded his consent. He opened it and exclaimed, "Thank God!" "Oh, no, that's, blah, 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 blah. That's Carton that says that." Mr. Lorry nodded his consent. Carton opened it and exclaimed, "Thank God!" "What is it?" asked Mr. Lorry eagerly. "A moment. Let me speak of it in its place first," He put his hand in his coat and took another paper from it. "That is the certificate which enables me to pass out of this city. Look at it, you see. Sidney Carton, an Englishman." Mr. Lorry held it open in his hand, gazing in his earnest face. "Keep it for me until tomorrow. I shall see him tomorrow, you remember, and I'd better not take it into the prison." "Why not?" "I don't know. I prefer not to do so. Now, take this paper that Dr. Manette's carried about him. It's a similar certificate, enabling him and his daughter and her child at any time to pass the barrier and the frontier. You see?" "Yes." "Perhaps he obtained it as his last and utmost precaution against evil yesterday. When is it dated?" "No matter. Don't stay to look. Put it up carefully with mine and your own. Now, observe. I never doubted until within this hour or two that he had or could have had such a paper. It's good until recalled, but it may be soon recalled, and I have reason to think will be." "They are not in danger." "They are in great danger. They are in danger of denunciation by Madame Defarge. I know it from her own lips. I've overheard words of that woman's tonight which would have presented their danger to me in strong colours. I've lost no time, and since then I've seen the spy. He confirms me. He knows that a wood sawyer, living by the prison wall, is under the control of the Defarges, and has been rehearsed by Madame Defarge as to his having seen her. He never mentions Lucie's name, making signs and signals to prisoners. It's easy to foresee that the pretence will be the common one, a prison plot, and that it will involve her life, and perhaps her child's, and perhaps her father's, for both have been seen with her at that place. Don't look so horrified. You'll save them all." "Heaven grant I may, Carton, but how?" "I'm going to tell you how. It will depend on you, and it could depend on no better man. This new denunciation will certainly not take place till after tomorrow, probably not until 2 or 3 days afterwards, more probably a week afterwards. You know it is a capital crime to mourn for or sympathize with a victim of the guillotine. She and her father would unquestionably be guilty of this crime, and this woman, the inveteracy of whose pursuit cannot be described, would wait to add that strength to her case and make herself doubly sure. You follow me?" "So attentively, and with so much confidence in what you say, that for the moment I lose sight," touching the back of the doctor's chair, "even of this distress." "You have money, and can buy the means of travelling to the sea-coast as quickly as the journey can be made. Your preparations have been completed for some days to return to England. Early tomorrow morning, have your horses ready, so that they may be in starting trim at 2 o'clock in the afternoon." "It shall be done." His manner was so fervent and so inspiring that Mr. Lorry caught the flame and was quick as youth. Who's speaking? Okay. So yeah, let's get back to Carton. Okay. "You are a noble heart. Did I say we would depend upon no better man? Tell her tonight what you know of her danger, as involving her and her child and her father. Dwell upon that, for she would lay her own fair head beside her husband's cheerfully." He faltered for an instant, then went on as before. "For the sake of her child and her father, press upon her the necessity of leaving Paris with them and you at that hour. Tell her that it was her husband's last arrangement. Tell her that more depends on it than she dare believe or hope. You think that her father, even in this sad state, will submit himself to her, do you not?
I'm sure of it.
I thought so. Quietly and steadily have all these arrangements made in the courtyards here, even to the taking of your own seat in the carriage. The moment I come to you, take me in and drive away.
I understand that I wait for you under all circumstances.
You have my certificate in your hand, with the rest, you know, and will reserve my place. Wait for nothing but to have my place occupied. And then for England.
Why, then, said Mr. Lorry, grasping his eager but so firm and steady hand, it does not all depend on one old man, but I shall have a young and ardent man at my side.
By the help of heaven you shall. Promise me solemnly that nothing will influence you to alter the course on which we now stand pledged to one another.
Nothing, Cotton.
Remember these words tomorrow. Change the course or delay in it for any reason, and no life can possibly be saved, and many lives must inevitably be sacrificed.
I will remember them. I hope to do my part faithfully.
And I hope to do mine. Now, goodbye.
Though he said it with a grave smile of earnestness, and though he even put the old man's hands to his lips, he did not part from him then. He helped him so far to arouse the rocking figure before the dying embers as to get a cloak and hat put upon it, and to tempt it forth to find where the bench and work were hidden that it still moaningly besought to have. He walked on the other side of it, and protected it to the courtyard of the house, where the afflicted heart, so happy in the memorable time when he had revealed his own desolate heart to it, outwatched the awful night. He entered the courtyard and remained there for a few moments alone, looking up at the light in the window of her room. Before he went away, he breathed a blessing towards it, and a farewell. Yeah. Man, oh man, oh man. 3 chapters to go. That's where we're going to stop today, though. That's where we're stopping today. Man, boy, this is going to be so sad. So sad when it ends. All right. Boy, oh boy. Okay, it's going to, oh no, that's the wrong button. One second. Where is it? Where's my thing? Here it is. One second. Let me just turn this off for a second. Bloop. Going to have a quick look at the ye old Kindle. Very good. Let's pull up. Don't know what to bring up. We've got a half hour. We've got a yeah. So we can read. It's let's open this up. One second. Where'd it go? Yeah. Oh, yeah, so, yeah, I just need to remind people. I mentioned this at the beginning. I have a whole bunch of stuff just happening out of the blue. So we'll be finishing this book on Monday. But then, I have a bunch of stuff that has to get completed. But yeah, so I got to take care of it. So a book club will be going on a little bit of a hiatus. But end of the year stuff is always crazy. But we shall get by. We shall get by. This is one of those IRL priority things there, and I'm just not going to be able to do book club at the same time while I'm doing this other project. So, okay, let's open our thing here. Where's the temple from beyond the tree? Let's try this one here. It's okay. It's okay. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Let's do this one.
All right. Not sure if I've read this one before. It's not one of Lovecraft's best. It's kind of weird, actually. It's more like it's more like an old Greek legend kind of thing, the way it reads. Yeah. You are starting the holiday madness? Oh, yeah. Yeah. Holiday madness. Boy, what time? It's already the 3rd. Already the 3rd. Good Lord. Oh yeah, yeah. It's. I think December is just like the crazy part of the year. No, it's. Yeah. Well, yeah. I don't want to talk too much about work and the. But man, oh man. Normally, yeah. The amount of gigs that I've been able to pick up this year is not been good. Aye. All right. So. But yeah, I think December's it's bringing a few things in. All right, that's good. The Tree by H.P. Lovecraft. On a verdant slope of Mount Mainolus in Arcadia, there stands an olive grove about the ruins of a villa. Close by is a tomb, once beautiful with the sublimest sculptures, but now fallen into as great decay as the house. At one end of that tomb, its curious roots displacing the time-stained blocks of Pentelic marble, grows an unnaturally large olive tree of oddly repellent shape, so like to some grotesque man or death-distorted body of a man that the country folk fear to pass it at night when the moon shines faintly through the crooked boughs. Mount Mainolus. Mount Mainolus is a chosen haunt of dreaded Pan, whose queer companions are many, and simple swains believe that the tree must have some hideous kinship to those weird Panisi. But an old beekeeper who lives in the neighboring cottage told me a different story. Many years ago, when the hillside villa was new and resplendent, there dwelt within it the two sculptors Kalos and Musides. From Lydia to Neapolis, the beauty of their work was praised, and none dared say that the one excelled the other in skill. The Hermes of Kalos stood in a marble shrine in Corinth, and the Pallas of Musides surmounted a pillar in Athens, near the Parthenon. All men paid homage to Kalos and Musides, and marveled that no shadow of artistic jealousy cooled the warmth of their brotherly friendship. But though Kalos and Musides dwelt in unbroken harmony, their natures were not alike. Whilst Musides revelled by night amidst the urban gaieties of Tegea, Kalos would remain at home, stealing away from the sight of his slaves into the cool recesses of the olive grove. There he would meditate upon the visions that filled his mind, and there devise the forms of beauty which later became immortal in breathing marble. Idle folk, indeed, said that Kalos conversed with the spirits of the grove, and that his statues were but images of the fauns and dryads he met there, for he patterned his work after no living model. So famous were Kalos and Musides that none wondered when the tyrant of Syracuse sent to them deputies to speak of the costly statue of Tyche, which he had planned for his great city. Of great size and cunning workmanship must the statue be, for it was to form a wonder of nations and a goal of travelers. Exalted beyond thought would be he whose work should gain acceptance, and for this honor Kalos and Musides were invited to compete. Their brotherly love was well known, and the crafty tyrant surmised that each, instead of concealing his work from the other, would offer aid and advice. this charity producing two images of unheard-of beauty, the lovelier of which would eclipse even the dreams of poets. With joy the sculptors hailed the tyrant's offer, so that in the days that followed their slaves heard the ceaseless blows of chisels. Not from each other did Kalos and Mercedes conceal their work, but the sight was for them alone. Saving theirs, no eyes beheld the two divine figures released by skilful blows from the rough blocks that had imprisoned them since the world began. At night, as of yore, Mercedes sought the banquet halls of Tegea, while Kalos wandered alone in the olive grove. But as time passed, men observed a want of gaiety in the once sparkling Mercedes. It was strange, they said amongst themselves, that depression should thus seize one with so great a chance to win art's loftiest reward. Many months passed, yet in the sour face of Mercedes came nothing of the sharp expectancy which the situation should arouse. Then, one day, the Mercedes spoke of the illness of Kalos, after which none marveled again at his sadness. Since the sculptor's attachment was known to be deep and sacred. Subsequently, many went to visit Kalos, and indeed noticed the pallor of his face. But there was about him a happy serenity which made his glance more magical than the glance of Mercedes, who was clearly distracted with anxiety, and who pushed aside all the slaves in his eagerness to feed and wait upon his friend with his own hands. Hidden behind heavy curtains stood the two unfinished figures of Tyche, little touched of late by the sick man and his faithful attendant. As Kalos grew inexplicably weaker and weaker, despite the ministrations of puzzled physicians and of his assiduous friend, he desired to be carried often to the grove which he so loved. There he would ask to be left alone, as if wishing to speak with unseen things. Mercedes ever granted his requests, though his eyes filled with visible tears, at the thought that Kalos should care more for the fauns and the dryads than for him. At last the end drew near, and Kalos discoursed of things beyond this life. Mercedes, weeping, promised him a sepulchre more lovely than the tomb of Mausolus, but Kalos bade him speak no more of marble glories. Only one wish now haunted the mind of the dying man, that twigs from certain olive trees in the grove be buried by his resting place, close to his head. And one night, sitting alone in the darkness of the olive grove, Kalos died. Beautiful beyond words was the marble sepulchre which stricken Mercedes carved for his beloved friend. None but Kalos himself could have fashioned such bas-reliefs wherein were displayed all the splendors of Elysium. Nor did Mercedes fail to bury close to Kalos's head the olive twigs from the grove. As the first violence of Mercedes' grief gave place to resignation, he labored with diligence upon his figure of Tyche. All honor was now his, since the tyrant of Syracuse would have the work of none save him or Kalos. His task proved a vent for his emotion, and he toiled more steadily each day, shunning the gaieties he had once relished. Meanwhile, his evenings were spent beside the tomb of his friend, where a young olive tree had sprung up near the sleeper's head. So swift was the growth of this tree, and so strange was its form, that all who beheld it exclaimed in surprise, and Mercedes seemed at once fascinated and repelled. 3 years after the death of Kalos, Mercedes dispatched a messenger to the tyrant, and it was whispered in the agora at Tegea that the mighty statue was finished. By this time, the tree by the tomb had attained amazing proportions, exceeding all other trees of its kind, and sending out a singularly heavy branch above the apartment in which Mercedes labored. As many visitors came to view the prodigious tree as to admire the art of the sculptor, so that Mercedes was seldom alone. Okay. But he did not mind his multitude of guests. Indeed, he seemed to dread being alone now that his absorbing work was done. The bleak mountain wind, sighing through the olive grove and the tomb tree, had an uncanny way of forming vaguely articulate sounds. The sky was dark on the evening that the tyrant's emissaries came to Tegea. It was definitely known that they had come to bear away the great image of Tyche and bring eternal honor to Mercedes. So their reception by the proxenoi, what are the proxenoi? It doesn't say. Let's look it up real fast. Proxonoi. Proxenoi. It's got to come from proxeny, maybe? Proxeny, okay, an arrangement whereby a citizen chosen by the city hosted foreign ambassadors at his okay. Okay, so they're like, they're visitors, but, okay, kind of like ambassador things too. Yeah, okay, let me just copy this into chat for anyone who wants to look it up. Paste. There we go. Oh, also hit send. There we go. Okay, so these are like ambassadors, basically. Where's my book? All right. It was definitely known that they had come to bear away the great image of Tyche and bring eternal honor to Mercedes. So their reception by the proxenoi was of great warmth. As the night wore on, a violent storm of wind broke over the crest of Menalus, and the men from far Syracuse were glad that they rested snugly in the town. They talked of their illustrious tyrant, and of the splendor of his capital, and exulted in the glory of the statue which Mercedes had wrought for him. And then the men of Tegea spoke of the goodness of Mercedes, and of his heavy grief for his friend, and how not even the coming laurels of art could console him in the absence of Kalos, who might have worn those laurels instead. Of the tree which grew by the tomb, near the head of Kalos, they also spoke. The wind shrieked more horribly, and both the Syracusans and the Arcadians prayed to Iolaus. In the sunshine of the morning, the proxenoi led the tyrant's messengers up the slope to the abode of the sculptor. But the night wind had done strange things. Slaves' cries ascended from a scene of desolation, and no more amidst the olive grove rose the gleaming colonnades of that vast hall wherein Mercedes had dreamed and toiled. Lone and shaken mourned the humble courts and the lower walls, for upon the sumptuous greater peristyle had fallen squarely the heavy overhanging bough of the strange new tree, reducing the stately poem in marble with odd completeness to a mound of unsightly ruins. Strangers and Tegeans stood aghast, looking from the wreckage to the great sinister tree, whose aspect was so weirdly human, and whose roots reached so queerly into the sculptured sepulchre of Kalos. And their fear and dismay increased when they searched the fallen apartment, For of the gentle Mercedes, and of the marvelously fashioned image of Tyche, no trace could be discovered. Amidst such stupendous ruin, only chaos dwelt, and the representatives of two cities left disappointed. Syracusans, that they had no statue to bear home, Tegeans, that they had no artist to crown. However, the Syracusans obtained, after a while, a very splendid statue in Athens, and the Tegeans consoled themselves by erecting in the agora a marble temple commemorating the gifts, virtues, and brotherly piety of Mercedes. All right, you have a great day, Grows. Have an awesome day. An awesome day. But the olive grove still stands, as does the tree growing out of the tomb of Kalos. And the old beekeeper told me that sometimes the boughs whisper to one another in the night wind, saying over and over again, I know, I know. Yeah. So that's I know that's not a terribly haunting kind of thing. It's okay though. It's okay. But there we go. There we go. This might be a good time to end here. There's a couple of minutes before we normally do, but yeah. Got some things I need to go do. So anyway, that is where we are at. That's where we are at. So I hope you've enjoyed the stream. I hope you've enjoyed A Tale of Two Cities so far. It's been quite a read. I did not think it was going to be as intense as it is. I kind of went into it with the, oh boy, this is going to be some old-timey writing going on. But it's so alive. It's quite a remarkable book. Quite a remarkable book, actually. Anyway, so we'll be finishing that on Monday. Yeah. So this is the Monday through Thursday stream, and Monday coming up is actually going to be the last the last book club actually on Monday for a bit there while I get caught up on this project thing. So, man, December. That's where we are at. What's that? Celophaeus. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What's Celophaeus about? Man, I don't recall reading that. Yeah. So anyway, but let's see. In the evenings. But yeah, tonight's Thursday. We'll see you on Twitch. Well, I'm going to be on Twitch tonight. So yeah, that'll be good. That'll be pretty fun. Don't know what we're doing yet. I'll catch up with you all on Discord about that. Anyway, we got that going. But in the meantime, I'm going to wish everyone a great day. A great day. And get stuff done. That's the object. That's the object. All right. Catch you all later and see you later tonight. Thank you for spending time with us. We've had a great time.